The moment my daughter-in-law said, "This isn't up for debate," I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. Days later, her parents walked through my front door with 4 suitcases, believing my home was already theirs. Chapter 1. The first ultimatum. Eleanor adjusted her gardening gloves, her palms stained with rich Seattle soil. At 64, she measured her life not in years, but in the perennials she nurtured through gray Pacific Northwest winters. Her sanctuary was a sprawling craftsman villa in Laurelhurst, now valued at just over $1 million, purchased with the life insurance money she received after her husband's death, and the savings she had built during her career as an architectural drafter. It was a home designed for quiet mornings and solitary grace, not for the sudden storm brewing in her kitchen. Her daughter-in-law Brittany stood by the island holding a mug of chamomile tea as if it were a scepter. Brittany's blonde hair was pulled into a sleek, severe ponytail, her cashmere cardigan immaculate. Beside her, Leo, Eleanor's only son, stared fixedly at the hardwood floor, studying the grain with intense fascination. "We've crunched the numbers, Eleanor," Brittany said, skipping any polite preamble. "My parents are selling their condo in Phoenix. They need a soft landing here. This house has 4 empty bedrooms upstairs. It makes no sense for you to live here all alone." Eleanor set her trowel down on the granite counter with a soft clink. "This house is not empty, Brittany. It is my home, and I am quite content living here all alone." "That's not up for debate," Brittany replied, her tone sharpening from persuasive to demanding. "Leo agrees with my plan. My parents deserve comfort in their retirement, so here is how it's going to be. You are going to let them move into the upstairs guest wing by the 1st of next month, or you lose us completely. No more family dinners, no more holidays, and you can forget about ever seeing the grandchildren again." Leo finally looked up, his eyes a mirror of trapped misery. He didn't speak, letting his wife's ultimatum hang in the damp morning air. Eleanor looked at her son for a long, quiet moment, measuring the weight of his cowardice. She did not yell, nor did she weep. She simply unclipped her gloves, placed them neatly by the sink, and walked out the back door toward her greenhouse. Chapter 2. A pattern of entitlement. The silence in the greenhouse was absolute, broken only by the steady drip of the automatic irrigation system. Eleanor watered a tray of tomato seedlings, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Brittany's ultimatum had not caught her entirely by surprise. It was merely the final jagged peak of a mountain built from years of small encroachments. It had started innocently enough 5 years ago, shortly after Leo and Brittany married. First came the spare set of keys for emergencies, which quickly turned into Brittany dropping by unannounced to sort Eleanor's pantry according to modern aesthetic standards. Then came the steady stream of favors, borrowing Eleanor's SUV for weekend road trips, dumping the grandchildren off without notice because of spontaneous spa days, and treating the villa's expansive backyard as a public venue for their friends' birthday parties. Every boundary Eleanor gently erected was met with a sigh of martyrdom from Brittany and a nervous plea for peace from Leo. "She just wants to be close to family, Mom," Leo would always say, as if closeness meant the total surrender of a mother's autonomy. Brittany's parents, Arthur and Helen, were cut from the same cloth. Eleanor had met them a handful of times at family gatherings where they treated her property not as someone else's private domain, but as a public park awaiting their permanent occupancy. They had already hinted at turning Eleanor's formal sitting room into a hobby space for Arthur's woodworking tools. They viewed Eleanor's widowhood not as a state of independent maturity, but as a vulnerability and invitation to colonize a space they had never earned. Brittany's demand was not an act of desperation. It was a calculated power play. She assumed Eleanor was lonely, frail, and utterly dependent on the crumbs of familial affection tossed her way. Eleanor wiped the condensation from a glass pane and looked out at the manicured lawn. She had spent 40 years building a life where her peace was non-negotiable. She had no intention of surrendering it to a couple of freeloaders disguised as refugees from Arizona. Chapter 3. The first shift in routine. The following Tuesday marked the weekly family dinner at the villa, a tradition Brittany treated with the rigid compliance of a corporate audit. Eleanor usually spent the entire afternoon roasting a prime rib, making homemade gravy, and baking a dessert that pleased everyone's dietary restrictions. At 4 o'clock, the kitchen was usually filled with the scent of garlic and rosemary. Today, however, the oven remained cold. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with a ledger and a cup of black coffee, reviewing her quarterly property tax assessments and her landscaping contracts. When the front door unlocked at 6 o'clock, Brittany and Leo strode in, followed by their 2 children, who immediately dropped their backpacks across the Persian runner in the foyer. "Something smells different," Brittany remarked, sniffing the air as she tossed her car keys onto the counter with a practiced clatter. "Did you order takeout?" "You know the kids shouldn't eat high-sodium takeout." "I didn't cook tonight." "Brittany," Eleanor said evenly, not looking up from her ledger. "Help yourself to whatever is in the pantry if the children are hungry." Brittany froze her hand, hovering over the empty stove. "What do you mean you didn't cook?" "It's Tuesday." "Tuesday is our family dinner. My parents are coming over on Friday to look at the upstairs guest bedrooms, and we had things to discuss regarding their move." Leo walked in, loosening his tie, looking nervously between his wife and his mother. "Mom, is everything all right? Are you feeling sick?" "I am feeling perfectly fine, Leo," Eleanor replied, closing the ledger with a quiet snap. "Just busy. For the past 5 years, I have structured my Tuesdays around feeding a family of 4. My schedule is changing. I have enrolled in an advanced landscape architecture course at the university downtown, and my evenings will now be dedicated to my own pursuits." Brittany's face flushed a mottled pink. "An advanced course? At your age, you're throwing a tantrum because we asked you to share your $1 million house with people who actually need it. This is passive-aggressive, Eleanor." Eleanor stood up, towering slightly over her daughter-in-law, her gaze cool and steady. "No, Brittany. Saying no to unwanted houseguests is direct. Expecting me to house your entire family because you refuse to buy a larger home of your own is the definition of aggressive." Chapter 4. The Conversation at the Park. The university campus was vibrant with early autumn color, a sharp contrast to the stagnant tension suffocating the Laurelhurst villa. Eleanor sat on a wooden bench beneath a towering maple tree, sketching a courtyard drainage plan for her class assignment. The scratch of her charcoal pencil against heavy paper was grounding. Her phone buzzed against the wooden slats. It was Leo. He had asked to meet her at a nearby coffee cart during his lunch hour. 20 minutes later, Leo appeared holding 2 paper cups. He looked exhausted, dark circles bruised beneath his eyes, his shirt collar slightly frayed. He sat down beside her, handing her a black coffee without sugar, the exact way she liked it. "Brittany is furious." Leo began staring straight ahead at a student walking a golden retriever. "She says you're punishing us." She called her parents and told them the upstairs guest rooms were practically theirs, and now they've already put their Phoenix condo on the market. Eleanor took a measured sip of her coffee, letting the warmth spread through her chest before speaking. "That was profoundly premature of them, Leo. I never agreed to their move. Not once did I say yes." "Mom, you don't understand the pressure I'm under at home," Leo said, his voice dropping into a defensive whine. "Brittany won't drop it. Every night is an interrogation. If her parents don't move in here, she's threatening to separate. She's talking about custody arrangements, about moving back to Arizona with the kids. I can't lose my family." "So you expect me to sacrifice my home so you can avoid an uncomfortable conversation with your wife?" Eleanor asked softly, turning her head to look directly into his eyes. "It's not a sacrifice. It's just sharing space." Leo insisted, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself and looked around nervously. "It's a huge $1 million house. What do you even do with 4 empty rooms upstairs?" "I live in them in peace, Leo," Eleanor said, her voice remaining perfectly level. I built this life through hard work and quiet solitude after your father passed. I am not a hotel, and I am not a safety net for your marital cowardice. If Brittany wants to leave because she cannot manipulate me into submission, that is a choice you two will have to navigate. But my doors are not opening to Arthur and Helen. Leo slumped back against the bench, the fight draining out of him, leaving behind only a bitter, helpless resentment. Chapter 5. Crossing the final boundary. Friday evening arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. Eleanor was in her study reviewing structural blueprints when she heard the heavy front door open downstairs, followed by the sound of unfamiliar voices echoing off the high foyer ceilings. She didn't rush out. She finished her calculation, capped her fountain pen, and walked slowly down the curved staircase. Standing in the grand entryway were Arthur and Helen, surrounded by 4 massive suitcases, a rolling clothing rack, and several taped cardboard boxes. Brittany stood beside them, looking flushed, with a triumphant, vindictive energy, while Leo hovered near the coat rack like a ghost, haunting his own life. "Surprise," Brittany announced, forcing a bright, brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mom and Dad's buyer backed out of their condo sale, so they decided to do a long-term visit instead. Since the guest rooms are upstairs, we figured they can just settle right in while we handle the logistics. Arthur, a heavy-set man with graying stubble and a perpetual scowl, spat out a dry laugh. About time someone put all this empty space to good use. Helen brought her sewing machine for the sunroom. Helen, clutching a quilted handbag like a shield, nodded approvingly at the crystal chandelier above. "It's a bit drafty up there, but we can manage. Brittany said you were more than happy to have us." Eleanor stood on the 3rd step from the bottom, looking down at the tableau of calculated disrespect. They had bypassed every boundary, weaponized their daughter's ultimatum, and moved themselves in while she was quietly working upstairs. They expected her to fold out of sheer social politeness, to swallow her anger to avoid a scene in front of her grandchildren. "You brought your luggage inside without my permission," Eleanor said. Her voice was remarkably quiet, cutting through the foyer silence with absolute clarity. Brittany's triumphant smile faltered slightly. "Don't be dramatic, Eleanor. They are family. They are staying in the guest wing upstairs. We already carried their heavy bags up. You brought your luggage into a private residence that you do not own, do not rent, and have no legal right to inhabit." Eleanor continued, her tone chillingly serene. "You have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed." Chapter 6. The Blueprint of Independence. The foyer fell into an awkward, stunned silence. Arthur shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his face darkening with offended vanity. "Is this how you treat your own flesh and blood?" Arthur barked, stepping forward. "Our daughter's husband grew up here, and this place will eventually pass down to him anyway. We aren't asking for handouts. We're just utilizing empty space that's going to waste while you sit here playing architect." Eleanor did not flinch. She descended the final 3 steps, walking past them toward the kitchen island where her landline phone sat beside a sleek silver organizer. "Phew." Eleanor said, her eyes fixed on her son, who was staring at his shoes as if hoping the floor would swallow him whole. "Did you tell them they could bring their belongings here?" Leo swallowed hard, his throat working convulsively. He didn't look up. "Mom, just let them stay for a few weeks until the condo sells. It'll keep the peace. Please, I can't take another week of this at home." "Peace bought by surrendering my home is not peace, Leo. It is occupation," Eleanor said firmly. She picked up the receiver and dialed a 10-digit number from memory. The silence in the room grew heavy, suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic electronic beeps of the keypad. Brittany's face hardened into a mask of pure malice. "Who are you calling?" Brittany snapped, taking a step toward the counter. "Are you calling the police on your own family? Have you lost your mind?" "I am calling David Vance," Eleanor said calmly, ignoring Brittany's rising hysteria. "He is my estate attorney and legal counsel for the Laurelhurst Family Trust." The mention of an attorney made Arthur scoff, though a flicker of unease crossed his weathered face. Oh, stop being dramatic with your rich lady theatrics. You can't throw family out on the street over a few suitcases. David, Eleanor said, into the receiver, her voice steady and resonant. It's Eleanor. I need you to prepare a formal trespass notice for the unauthorized occupants in my home. Yes, right now. I'll send over the verification code via email. Chapter 7. The Legal Reality Check. Brittany lunged forward, her hand slamming down onto the granite countertop beside the phone. Are you insane? You are calling a lawyer on us over a family visit. We are your son's family. You're tearing your own blood apart for a bunch of empty rooms. Eleanor placed the phone down on speaker mode, letting David's crisp, professional voice fill the sprawling foyer. Mrs. Vance, I heard your instruction clearly. The attorney's voice echoed through the high-ceilinged room. The property is held by the Laurelhurst Family Trust, and you, as sole trustee, have exclusive authority over its use. Any non-family occupants or extended relatives attempting to establish residency without a registered lease or explicit written trustee approval have no legal right to occupy the property. Shall I contact local law enforcement to assist in removing the unauthorized occupants? Arthur's face turned the color of a bruised plum. Listen here, you pompous parasite. We aren't trespassers. Our daughter is part of this family. Your daughter does not own this property, Sir David replied smoothly over the speakerphone, his tone clinical and unyielding. The deed is held in an irrevocable trust, and neither your daughter nor your son holds any equity stake in this million-dollar estate. Helen gasped, clutching her quilted handbag tighter, finally realizing the scale of the miscalculation. They had played their hand assuming Eleanor was a vulnerable old widow, ripe for emotional exploitation, only to discover they were standing on legally hostile territory. Leo looked like he wanted to dissolve into atoms. He stepped forward, his voice trembling. Mom, please. Hang up. This is insane. We can talk about this like normal people without lawyers. We are done talking, Leo, Eleanor said, switching off the speakerphone and ending the call with a single tap. She looked at her son, seeing not a man caught between two worlds, but a coward who had invited a wolf into his mother's house to save himself from a barking dog. You wanted a test of loyalty, Brittany. You got one. Chapter 8. The Breaking Point. The atmosphere in the villa shattered completely. Arthur cursed under his breath, kicking a small leather suitcase at his feet. Come on, Helen. We're leaving. This woman is a cold-hearted narcissist. We're not staying another second in a house where we aren't treated like human beings. Helen hurried toward the door, her face red with mortification, muttering about disrespectful elders and modern ingratitude. Brittany stood frozen, her strategic arrogance evaporating into raw, sputtering fury. You think you've won, don't you? Brittany hissed, pointing a trembling finger at Eleanor. You think you're so strong, sitting in your big, empty house all by yourself. But you're going to die alone in this mausoleum, Eleanor. Leo is my husband, and when I walk out that door with him and the kids, you will never see your grandchildren again. Mark my words. Eleanor did not flinch, nor did she raise her voice. She simply walked over to the entryway table, where a heavy brass bowl sat the bowl, where Leo always dropped his emergency spare set of keys whenever he visited. With deliberate slowness, Eleanor picked up the heavy brass keys, letting them jingle softly in the tense air. She looked at her son, who was standing paralyzed between his furious wife and his unyielding mother. Leo, Eleanor said quietly, are you walking out that door with them, or are you staying? Leo looked at Brittany, whose eyes flashed with a final, desperate demand for total capitulation. Then he looked at his mother, standing tall beside the staircase she had designed with her own hands. The crushing weight of his choices pressed down on him, but cowardice won the final round. I have to go with my family, Mom, Leo whispered.